I chose to dope more because George was saying dope, and it was more because I think because he led me to believe everyone was doing it.
If you were to allow doping, it would be a free-for-all, and who knows what sort of states people would be getting themselves into, buying stuff on the black market or in chemists or whatever, filling themselves full of crazy products.
How motivated are you? How much do you want to win? I mean, do you really want that Olympic gold? Or do you want that world title fight? Or do you want to get to the top of your chosen sport? Because if you do, this is what it takes.
Bernice Wilson grew up with a passion for sport. As a kid, she played netball and hockey to a high level before eventually finding her calling as a track sprinter. In 2002, she won a bronze medal in the 200 metres at the English Schools Athletics Championships. It looked like her dream of making it in sport was coming true, until she met Dr. George Skafidas.
My first impressions of him was that he was a strict coach and he had a different way of thinking with certain things. I think I knew that he was really, if he was going to get coached by him, he would be really serious about it. So we got into a relationship, I think it was a year or two after he started coaching me. So I think that was around 2008.
It was at this point when Bernice decided to dope.
I chose to dope more because George was saying dope. And it was more because I think because he led me to believe everyone was doing it, and it was like, oh, everybody's doing it, you need to do it. My relationship was obviously messed up. It was a domestic violent relationship. It was like, if ever I said no, he wasn't happy about that. And it got to the point where it was physically, like I was literally getting sometimes hit quite a lot. I was getting it was just terrible. It was really, really terrible. So sometimes for me to say no wasn't a good idea. So anyway, so I went with what he was saying, and I ended up taking drugs.
Then in June 2011, Bernice failed a drugs test and was banned from sport for 4 years.
I was in such a dark place, and when I say a dark place, I was like, I couldn't sleep, and everything that my parents had done, that my dad was very much into athletics, everything that he had done, I felt like it had just gone down the drain. So we always had these meetings about my athletics, and he said about me doping again, and I said no. And because I said no, he wasn't having it, so that's when he sort of tricked me. 2011 to 2015, I was doing my 4-year ban, but then in 2015 I was due to compete and I was going to compete, but then I failed another doping test because they just come randomly just to test me. So I was really blaming myself, like, oh, what have I done? And then he admitted to eventually swapping my vitamin tablets for drugs.
Bernice was able to prove that she was doping inadvertently, and George Skafidas received a lifetime ban from sport. The ex-sprinter certainly isn't the only athlete to have been pressured into doping. Coaches can have a significant impact on an athlete's decision to dope.
We need to kind of move beyond the athlete primarily and kind of focus on who else is within that circle, who else is there, and who can potentially be impacting an athlete's decision-making processes and those motivations. They might feel the pressure from a coach, but they might not feel the pressure, or they might feel more supported by the parent. And it's who is it that they're primarily driven by, I suppose, and whose influences are kind of shaping what they do and what they choose to do.
The biological passport is seen as one of the most effective means of catching dopers. Mark Daly, an investigative journalist for the BBC, decided to dope himself in order to put the passport to the test.
I wanted to test the athlete's biological passport because we were hearing that athletes were still doping. They were still using EPO, they were still using blood bags. And so its efficacy was being challenged often. We thought, well, look, why not assess whether the best tool in the box that the anti-doping scientists have is as effective as they say it is. I'm an amateur athlete. I would never have considered doping in any case. But when I did it, I don't think you have to be a professional to feel what it feels like when you take your first drug or you dope for the first time. It's crossing a line, amateur or professional, and I really felt it, actually. I really felt it. When my VO2 max had increased to, I think it was 63, and it turned, that's 7%. So it was 7% in 7 or 8 weeks, which was massive. Sure enough, it came back as not raising a red flag. I think that I was something about, between 50 and 60% likely doping, which is absolutely miles away from the threshold that you would need to even begin to suspect an athlete. As an amateur with no real scientific input, I had managed to dope successfully, see an improvement in my performance, and get away with it.
Mark's experiment shows it's still relatively straightforward for even athletes competing at the amateur level to dope. However, the answer to the doping problem may lie within the athletes themselves.
I think the approach is in urgent need of radical overhaul, and part of the problem has been its history of emerging in the sporting hierarchy as a top-down approach. We've almost come to talk to athletes last, and that should never really be the situation. It's a sad fact that we are 20 years on, really, from the first discussions that happened on bringing about a worldwide anti-doping system, that we're sort of finally letting athletes to have a seat at the table if they behave themselves and follow various rules that we've laid out for them. And I certainly would actually put athletes in charge of their own eligibility to take part.
With eradicating doping seeming to be an impossible goal, more people are wondering whether it would make more sense to allow doping in sport. Ellis Cashmore is a visiting professor of sociology at Aston University in Birmingham. He says that it's time to stop fighting to keep sport clean and instead accept doping as a part of competition.
I would prefer a world in which there is no doping in sport. But then again, I'm also a realist and recognise that this is not anything that we can do much about. I then begin to ask the question, what's so wrong about it? I mean, we use shoes that propel people to sub-2-hour marathons. We allow people to use glasses, contact lenses, laser surgery on their eyes. We allow all sorts of augmentation, and yet we seem to draw the line at drugs. And I don't see any logical reason for doing that. All you've got to do is reframe the rules and say that doping is now allowed, and it wouldn't be cheating any longer. In other words, there's no God-given fair play or cheating. They are just simply a reflection of how we write the rules. We spend an awful lot of money, time and effort into trying to rid sport of doping. I suppose the question arises at some stage whether all that effort and money and time would be better spent trying to regulate doping. In other words, recognise, accept that there is doping in sport and try to make it a safer environment.
Ellis brings up some interesting points. However, the athletes themselves have a different outlook.
It's very dangerous. So like I said, George experimented with me with what he was giving me, and I was told he could have killed me, and that is like scary. So I would not be in favour of it, no.
If you were to allow doping, it would be a free-for-all, and who knows what sort of states people would be getting themselves into, buying stuff on the black market or in chemists or whatever, filling themselves full of crazy products. If you're an amateur and what you're trying to do is go from a Cat 3 to a Cat 2 and you get caught doping, I mean, you just look like a complete idiot. And you deserve all the infamy that would come with it and the shame, because that's just pathetic. Just do the sport for the love of it.
After failing her second drugs test, Bernice left George and became a commission member for UK anti-doping.
I didn't want anybody to go through what I'd gone through, and that's in terms of the domestic violence, that's in terms of the horrible relationship that I was in, because I just thought if I could help one person, then that would be amazing. I can't change back time, but all I can do is help others, so I hope I do help others.
It depends on who you ask, but it seems like most athletes feel there is a wrong way to win. And while it's difficult to imagine a time when sport is free of doping, many feel it's still worth trying to keep sport clean.
I think if you were to ask, take a straw poll of 17, 16, 17, 18-year-old athletes and ask them who were trying to break through into the elite levels, and ask them whether they wanted a tough anti-doping regime, I think a huge majority of those would say yes.
There genuinely are athletes who do not want doping in their sport. We really do have to work for the athletes who are wanting to see the reputation of their sport really in a far better place.
If there was a young athlete considering to dope, I would say don't do it. Rely on your training, your hard work, your support, and you will go far.